The West is big, and this channel is dedicated to helping you explore it. The fall through the spring is a great time to visit one of my favorite places, Moab, Utah. During the summer, many places are loved to death, forcing the Park Service to require reservations for some parks, including Arches. I've been to the area several times, and this year I went both in June and in October. In June, the rooms were more available and cheaper, but it was hot, and I still couldn't get a reservation for Arches. In October, it was very expensive, but the temps were better, but I still couldn't get an Arches reservation. But that gave me time to explore places that were new to me. That's my actual foot in a dinosaur footprint. I hope this video will encourage you to plan a visit to a park when you don't need a reservation. And that's what I'm doing. This is a comprehensive guide to Moab. This little town of less than 5,000 attracts millions of visitors each year from around the world. Arches is the biggest draw, but there are many more reasons to come. I'll take you to two very different districts of Canyonlands. One is an island in the sky, with several viewpoints to the canyons below that were carved by the Green and Colorado rivers. Some of them look down on the Needles district, where we'll go to see where the ancestral Pueblo left their mark, and we'll hike to a place where they stored their crops. I'll show you how the Shafer Trail provides relatively easy access to the backcountry, if you have the nerve. And we'll watch the sunrise in one of my favorite places. On another morning, we'll go back in time to walk where those giants once did. This is a road trip, so I'll show you some of the places I stopped to rest along the way. And rest stops are nothing new. We'll also visit a 140-year-old rest stop that was used by pioneers on a stagecoach line. You can use your wheels to see the scenery, including the self-propelled type, as well as the big, knobby, tired variety. But there are also short and long hiking trails. You can float lazily through a canyon, or not so lazily on the Colorado River. For those who like heights, there are 500-foot cliffs, and the Fisher Towers just waiting to be climbed. And you can even learn about geologic and human history. The town of Moab is quite a little gem, with accommodations for the budget camper, as well as for those looking for a place that's as special as the scenery. There are restaurants of all types, and even a few night spots. And if you didn't bring your mountain bike, 4x4 or other gear, you can rent it all here. The area has become so popular that you now need a reservation just to enter Arches National Park, and they can be hard to get. But I'll tell you how to get one. This is a long video, and I don't expect most of you to watch it in one sitting. Though I do encourage you to skip to the next segment if you get bored with one of them, and to come back later to finish it. This is one reason why it's a good idea to subscribe to my channel, and to click that like button. In the past, some have even donated actual money as a thank you for helping them plan their trip. This, of course, is very appreciated and extremely helpful. But it's not quite as easy as something that's almost as valuable, clicking that subscribe button. And doing so will make it easier to come back to this video and to watch over 100 other video guides on my channel. I know many of you are planning a road trip to all of Utah's Mighty 5 national parks. And of course, I've produced a video to help guide you on that journey. It covers all the parks, and if you're going to the rest of Utah, it will definitely help you plan your trip. You can drive all the park's roads in just a 36-mile round trip, and they take you to many of the park's best features. And most are just a few hundred feet on flat paths from the parking lot. The park is small enough to drive through in a few hours, but it's intriguing enough that some spend a week or two exploring it on foot, on bicycles, and on off-road vehicles, in search of adventure in the land of more than 2,000 arches. Because of our limited time, we'll explain how to make the most out of about a day and a half in the park. The entrance is just 4 miles from the center of town. After paying the National Park entry fee, it's a good idea to stop at the visitor center to learn about the area you're about to explore. The bulk of the park is on a plateau, several hundred feet above the visitor center. The road switches back twice as it climbs the Moab Fault. A sign near the top states that 6 million years ago, the rock layers on this side of the valley dropped 2,600 feet lower than those on the other side of the valley. Once on the plateau, the park road winds its way north past 400 to 500 foot sandstone monoliths that were pushed up through the surrounding landscape. The first large pullout is for a place called Park Avenue. The high stone walls reminded early explorers of the famous New York landmark. It's hard to understand just how big everything is until you see someone wandering in the rocks. There is a short trail, but summer temperatures are often in the 90s or higher, so you need to bring plenty of water. From the viewpoint, you get your first look at the different rock in the park. The arches tend to form in the Entrada sandstone. Here it's way up near the top. Throughout the park, you'll see signs stating, "Don't bust the crust." It's alive. This refers to microorganisms that live in the soil. It takes 100 years for tiny black bacteria to create enough soil for even the most basic plants. And one step from your boot could kill it. So don't bust the crust. A little further down the road, we come to the La Salle Mountain viewpoint. Beyond the outcrop are petrified yellowish sand dunes. In the background, to the east, the La Salles rise 13,000 feet, so snow covers them most of the time. To the north, there's a great view of several more features. These are the Three Gossips. This is the Organ and the Tower of Babel. While we drive to our next stop, I'll try to explain how the landscape got this way. It all started about 300 million years ago, when this tectonic plate was closer to the equator. This land was covered by seawater. So much seawater that 7,900 feet of mostly salt but also potash and gypsum accumulated before the sea dried up. For much of the next 100 to 150 million years, hundreds of feet of sand and other soft materials built up on top of the salt, during a time when this region was dry and much like today's Sahara Desert. By this time, the ancestral Rocky Mountains were eroding away, providing plenty of overburden material which helped turn the ancient desert sand to stone. The weight of the sand and the mountain debris put pressure on the underlying salt layer. Under pressure, salt becomes a semi-fluid. It moves and oozes, kind of like pushing on the center of a tube of toothpaste. Because the weight of the sand and other overburden varied from place to place, in some places the ground sank, and in others it pushed up massive slabs of sandstone, like the one seen here. Starting 100 million years ago, the erosion process began to take over, and the tectonic plate began moving north. All this movement caused many vertical cracks that created giant blocks of sandstone, as well as thinner stone slabs. This can be seen quite easily from the air in the Devil's Garden. Over time, the cracks became wider, and with the help of the erosional forces of water, ice, and wind, the tall slabs began to look like the fins we see in the park today. In many places, erosional forces and waterborne chemical reactions further weakened the stone, causing holes to form in the fins. When a hole has a span of at least 3 feet, it's classified as an arch. This process has occurred at least 2,000 times in the park, and it continues to happen. And from time to time, arches do collapse. That's the end of the lecture, and just in time. We're coming to the parking area for Balanced Rock. It's one of the more popular stops. The parking lot is very full most of the day, but I shot this in June, late in the day, when there was plenty of parking, which goes to show you that you don't need a vehicle reservation to really enjoy this park. This area was the original entrance to the park in 1929, back when it was a freshly minted national monument. The old dirt road is still there, but it's unmaintained and only suitable for off-road vehicles now. The current road we just drove in on didn't open until 1958. If you're a sharp-eyed viewer, you may have noticed that there was an extra feature back in the day. The park's website has repeat photography, which shows that there was once a baby Balanced Rock, but it fell over in the 70s. One day, the big one will fall over too. As you can imagine, this is a popular spot for photos. And a paved trail takes you right up to Balanced Rock. And if you're curious, it's 128 feet tall. Now we're going to take a side road to the windows section, where we'll explore two of the best-known features in the park: the windows and the massive double arch. On the way, the view out the windscreen is quite good. This is a little bit bigger parking area, but it's still hard to get a parking spot here during the day, though the timed entry system has reduced wait times. On this trip I got here about an hour before sunset. I like to come here late in the day because it's a great time to shoot the north window, but it's not a very good time to shoot Double Arch, which is across the street, because at this time of day it's in shadow. This area looks dramatically different depending on the time of day that you're here, which means that you should come here at different times of day. Here it is in the morning, and the light isn't great then either. It turns out that this is one of the few places that look better when the sun is high, meaning in the middle of the day. And you may recognize it from one of the early scenes in one of the Indiana Jones movies. This is Turret Arch at sunset. This is it just after sunrise. And in case you're wondering, here's what it looks like on a cloudy day. My favorite time to come here is right around sunrise. It's a great time to take a little hike through the window. In the morning, that magnificent rock wall looks less than great, but when you scramble through that giant hole or window, it looks like this. That's Turret Arch, perfectly lit through the window, just after sunrise. On this particular trip, I was the first one to get to this spot. It wasn't easy or even very safe. In fact, this guy decided it wasn't worth the risk to join me. It's a spot that's big enough for only 1 or 2 tripods. When you're lucky enough to be here, you just can't help but applaud Mother Nature's artistry and wonder how time, wind, and the occasional sprinkles of rain created such an iconic view. Being here is one of my favorite memories of all my trips to Arches. We're back on the main park road now, where sites like this are common. I try to stop at all the viewpoints. This is the parking area for Panorama Point. At sunset, I was the only one here. There's a nice view of the road. But there's an even better one in front of whatever this weird formation is called. The sound of silence made it even better. A further 2.5 miles down the road, we take another side road to the most famous arch in the park, Delicate Arch. It's the one on the Utah license plate. With the help of Google Earth, you can see that the lot isn't very big. And this one is crowded all of the time, especially near sunset, because that's the best time to see this famous arch. But before we go there, I'm going to show you a little secret. When this lot is full, there's another way to see the famous arch. A further mile down the side road, there's another parking lot. It's for the lower Delicate Arch viewpoint. The view from the lot is pretty good, but a short hike gets you to many better spots. For some reason, I didn't shoot any video while I hiked. I just took some stills. But you can see it's a pretty spectacular spot. The sandstone cliffs are nearly as impressive as the arch. And no, you can't get very close to the arch here, and because of that, it's kind of hard to judge its scale. But it is an amazingly odd bit of landscape that would make the hike worthwhile, even if the arch wasn't there. I've been up here a few times and in different lighting conditions, and it never disappoints. If you keep on going, at one spot, you're actually above the top of the arch, looking down on it and the bowl it sits in. But let's face it, when you get all the way to Arches, you want to stand right next to Delicate Arch. Again, Google Earth is going to help us show the trail. The first point of interest is not far from the parking lot. It's an old cabin. It was built by John Wolfe and his son, who migrated here from Ohio in 1888. They managed to graze cattle here for over 20 years. They also grew a few crops by damming a nearby spring. His wife finally brought the rest of the family down in 1906. But after just 2 years, she had had enough of living in this little one-room cabin, so they all moved to Moab. There's more to see before we go to the arch. Just after crossing the footbridge, take the little trail to the left to see some ancient rock carvings called petroglyphs. And some of them are very old, but some are more recent, as you can see that there are people on horses. And of course, horses didn't get here until the Spanish did in the 1500s. It doesn't take long to get to the petroglyph panel, and it's well worth taking this little side trip. The main trail to the arch is only about 1.5 miles long, and it rises about 500 feet. You're on slick rock the whole way. And by the way, slick rock isn't slick, unless it's wet. At times, the trail is hard to see. This is a cairn. Don't build your own, but following them is the best way to get to Delicate Arch. It gets interesting near the top, and at one point, it's on a narrow shelf. And when you turn the corner, there's a great view of the 52-foot-high symbol of Utah, Delicate Arch. You can walk right up to it, or even under it. It's the most recognizable site in Utah, and it sits in a sandstone plateau that swirling wind and rain has carved into a bowl, with natural amphitheater seating that provide a great place to just sit and look. The LaSalle Mountains provide the backdrop, and at sunset, this is the perfect place to be. It's not bad after dark either. Now we're going to return to the main road and head to a place with a very evocative name, the Firey Furnas. There we'll find a nice hiking trail that's really more of a maze. Arches isn't much of a hiking park. Most of its sites are near the road or require just a short walk. The Firey Furnas is different. It's hard to tell from the ground, but it's really like a maze, and it's very easy to get lost in there. You can't hike it without a $10 permit or a ticket for a ranger-led hike. And you can't get one of those solo permits without first being trained on how to navigate the labyrinth that is the Firey Furnas. And they are serious about it. So for most of us, the best option is to get a ticket for a ranger-led hike. These hikes are offered from spring through the fall, and the tickets are $16 each. But they can be hard to get. But that wasn't the case this August. On my last 2 June trips, the tickets were sold out. So it's been a while since I've been able to walk through the Firey Furnas. So now I'm going to show you a video that's made by the Park Service.
Hi, I'm Rob Lorenz at Arches National Park. Arches is known for its vibrant color, whimsical shapes, and vast desert landscape. In this jubilee of red rock and blue sky, the Firey Furnas takes its place as one of the more unique attractions of the park. Its long parallel rows of alternating canyons and fins create a maze of rock that, when seen from above, makes it seem like the landscape's been scraped with a giant rake. Here at ground level, this wonderland of rock beckons visitors seeking shade, solitude, and adventure. Because the Firey Furnas harbors rare plants and fragile soils in a confined area, the National Park Service limits the number of people that can enter it each day. In order to visit the Firey Furnas, you must obtain a permit at the visitor center or join a ranger on a guided walk. However, a guided walk through the Firey Furnas isn't for everyone. The tour route is roughly 2 miles long and takes about 3 hours to complete, so a moderate level of physical fitness is needed. Along the way, you'll encounter a few body-scraping passageways, exposure to steep drop-offs, lots of rock scrambling, and tricky sections that require using your hands, feet, and even your rear end to maneuver. While injuries are rare, some areas may make people with a fear of heights or narrow spaces uncomfortable. Due to the difficulty and length of the tour, children under 5 years of age are not permitted. Believe it or not, there are absolutely no water fountains, snack machines, or bathrooms in the Firey Furnas, so you'll have to make do with whatever you can carry from the trailhead. Speaking of which, you should plan on bringing at least 1 quart or liter of water, a snack, some sun protection, and an extra layer of clothes. Scared yet? You shouldn't be. You'll forget all these minor inconveniences once you're winding your way through this improbable landscape of fins, spires, and hidden arches. Firey Furnas tours are offered daily from March through October, and tickets are usually purchased online. Now, these walks often fill up a couple months in advance, so it's best to plan early to reserve your spot. On behalf of the National Park Service, we hope you join us soon in the Firey Furnas.
We're now on our way to the Devil's Garden. On the way, you may want to stop at Skyline Arch. It's one of the biggest in the park. As you might expect, it's also hard to find a parking spot in the Devil's Garden. If you find a spot, take the easy hike to the largest natural rock span in the world. The trail is sandy, and on hot days the trip can be tiring, so it's always a good idea to bring plenty of water. Soon, there's a view of fins in the distance. About a mile in, the trail forks to the left, and you can see the largest natural rock span in the world, Landscape Arch. In the afternoon, it's in shadow, but in the morning, it's lit. From base to base, it's 306 feet across, and no, you're not allowed to walk across it. Many years ago, a man died trying. Beyond Landscape Arch, there are many more arches along the trail. At about the 3-mile point, you get the chance to walk on top of a fin. It's a pretty unique experience. If you plan your trip very well, you can do all of the things described in this segment in a day to a day and a half. Although weather and crowds may force you to improvise. But no matter what you do, I'll bet that arches will be one of the highlights of your Grand Circle trip. For those of you interested in photography, here's a review of my favorite photo ops in the park. In addition to a good camera and tripod, you should also have an app on your phone that tells you where the sun will be at any time, anywhere. I use Helios for the iPhone. You should scout your locations on the phone before you start your trip. Around noon, most of the wall is in the sun. And in late afternoon, the good light will be hitting the largest wall. And that's when this shot was taken. At Balanced Rock, there are times in the morning when it can be backlit, so it's safer to shoot in the afternoon. The snowpack LaSalle Mountains will also be lit in the afternoon. As we said, it's best to shoot the back side of the north window just after sunrise. But the side facing the parking lot looks great in the afternoon. Often tour groups of up to 20 people are here well before sunrise, leaving no room for many who want to get to this spot. This shot was taken near the windows. All I did was turn around and point the lens towards Double Arch. The main park road looks great in the late morning to early evening when heading north into the park. Going in the other direction, it's backlit in the evening. The best light is also on the Firey Furnas in the afternoon and evening. To capture Landscape Arch in the sun, you'll have to hike a mile or so in the morning. In the afternoon, it's backlit, and it's even hard to see the arch. The best time to shoot Delicate Arch is at sunset. If the weather's nice, there will be a crowd, but there are plenty of good places to put your tripod. But still, it's best to be early. Again, remember to scout the location using a map or preferably a tool like Helios on the iPhone. It will tell you when and where the sun will rise and set. It'll really help you get a nice shot. Well, I hope that gives you an idea of why you need a reservation ticket just to get into Arches. It really is an amazing place. But you do need one of these tickets to get into the park, and the Park Service has made a video to tell you how to do it.
Hi there. If you're planning to visit Arches between April 1st and October 31st, you'll need to purchase a timed entry ticket to enter the park between the hours of 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. Tickets will be released on the first of the month, 3 months in advance. In order to visit, follow these 2 steps.
Secure timed entry tickets in advance. Timed entry tickets will only be available online or over the phone from recreation.gov. Purchase your park pass or pay the entrance fee when you arrive.
We encourage you to plan ahead and be prepared well before your visit. If you didn't get a reservation in advance, a limited number of next day tickets will be released at 6 p.m. Mountain Time daily. Just remember, you can only get these over the phone or on recreation.gov. Tickets will not be available at the entrance station. Didn't get a ticket at all? You can still enter the park before 7 a.m. and after 4 p.m. daily. Timed entry tickets help evenly pace visitation into the park to lessen congestion and improve visitor experiences. For more information, including step-by-step instructions, a full ticket release schedule, and frequently asked questions, visit go.nps.gov/Arches ticket. See you soon.
Canyonlands is the other national park near Moab. It's an immense wilderness full of cliffs, mesas, and of course, canyons. It was shaped by the Colorado and Green rivers into 4 different districts. They are all primitive with no potable water. The districts are widely separated by fascinating and monumental natural features, and there are no roads linking them together. The Needles District Visitor Center is about 80 miles southish of Moab. Hiking trails are the main attraction here, but it's a place only for those with the ability to be self-reliant, as well as being physically fit. If you like being isolated and seeing what few have, it's a great place to be in the middle of nowhere while being someplace incredible. The Mesa District is even more remote. It's over 130 miles from Moab. The roads in this district are 4x4 only rough tracks, and they also require that you have a great deal of self-reliance and skill just to get in and out of it. And if you need a rescue, it will take many hours and be very expensive. The rivers in the park are categorized as a separate water district. Unlike Arches National Park, you don't need a reservation to enter any of Canyonland's districts. But on one Saturday in October, it actually took about 55 minutes to get up to the gate. And once through, I was actually surprised that only a few places were crowded. At the main gate, they give you a little brochure, and it has a map. And we're going to use that map to guide us through all 34 miles of roadway in the island in the sky. It's only 30 miles or 35 minutes from Moab. The road rises about 1,800 feet to an elevation of about 6,000 feet. There's only a couple of paved roads in the Island in the Sky district, but they take you within a short walk of the most popular views on the Mesa. There's also a number of unpaved roads, and I'm going to take you on one of those that most SUVs can't handle, if you have the nerve. The visitor center is a few miles after the main gate, and it's always the first place you should stop. It's a good place to learn a little bit more about the park. And the rangers are always helpful and can answer all your questions.
Shafer Trail.
And if you're planning on going off-road, be sure to ask them about current road conditions, because if there's been a recent rain, they may be impassable. This is also the only place in the park where there's water. Even in the campgrounds, there is no drinking water. Our first stop is just about a mile from the visitor center. It's the Shafer Trail Overlook. This is an amazing road that was originally used to get cattle to market, but now it's one of the premier features of this area. And just about any vehicle can do it. We're going to use it to drive all the way back to Moab. There are a few trails in this area, and one trailhead is near the Shafer Trail Overlook. It's called the Neck Spring. The Neck is a narrow section of the mesa that's only about 40 feet wide, but the road is so well designed that you won't even know that you're only a few feet from a 1,000-foot drop. The view from the road then changes rather dramatically. It's a huge flat plain for the next few miles. And if you're in the mood for a little exercise, there's another trail, the Lathrop Trail. And in 2.5 miles, it takes you down over 1,000 feet to the valley floor. Of course, then you have to hike back up. Then the road gets much more interesting and more twisty. And then there's one of the most popular places in the park, Mesa Arch. It's one of the must-see places in the Island in the Sky. Canyonlands is known for its spectacular, immense views of distant landscapes. But with the signature view in Island in the Sky, there's a twist. This is Mesa Arch. Everyone who comes to Canyonland should see it, and I'm going to show you how. The trailhead and small parking lot are about 6 miles from the visitor center. It fills up at sunrise, but at 9 a.m. on this day, there are plenty of empty spots. The arch is about 1/3 of a mile, or 10 minutes, from the road. It's just up this well-maintained path. There are 2 ways to get there, but the Raven seems to like this more direct route, and that's good enough for me. The trail gains just about 56 feet. I wouldn't really call this a hike. It's a well-maintained path that is well-defined as it gains just 56 feet. The climb is gentle enough for just about anybody, but if you need to, take a look around. It's a good excuse to catch your breath. Signs remind you to stay on the trail to avoid killing the cryptobiotic soil. One step could kill one of these little colonies. These little bumps represent decades of growth in this harsh environment. the trail becomes less defined after its high point, and we get our first glimpse of the arch. It winds its way through the juniper trees. A few park-approved cairns mark the way. When in doubt, step on rock to avoid hurting that delicate soil. And that sign, it says stay off the arch. Okay, from here, the arch doesn't look that special. It looks like just another arch, and not a very pretty one. But when you get closer, it gets better. The arch perfectly frames the incredible landscape in the canyon below. And remember, we're only about 10 minutes from the parking lot. And as you can see, at mid-morning, it's not very crowded. By this time, most of the crowd has left, and it's easy to explore and even climb around. There are several places with interesting views. And the light in the canyon, it's still good for photos. But the best time to be here, especially if you're really into photography, is at sunrise. And lots of folks know it. They come well before sunrise, and they're all trying to get under the arch to capture a classic shot like this. Or this. Or this. When there's this many people here, you may not even be able to fight your way to the viewpoint. So some choose to go to higher ground. Sunrise is the best time to get the best shot, but it's not necessarily the best time to be here because the crowds, well, just make it a little bit difficult. The best time to be here is when nobody else is. When you're lucky enough to be the only one here, and once I was that lucky, it's one of the rare places with the sound of silence. Once all I could hear was the whoosh of air as a raven flew by. When you're done exploring, you don't have to go back the same way you came. Another trail goes around the other side of the mound, and this way seems to be a little flatter. Again, try to stay on the rock as much as you can. This part of the trail also has more little placards to tell you about the vegetation, both big and small. Again, it's an easy stroll back to the parking lot. This is a great way to just spend an hour to an hour and a half to see what is probably the best known view in Canyonlands. And once you've done it, you'll be glad that you did. Near the arch, there's a fork in the road. We're going to the left and continue for about 6 miles to the end of the road and the Grand View Overlook. This is a busy area, and I had to take a lap or two before I found a parking spot. It's a short paved walk to the viewpoint. It's pretty obvious why they call it Grand View. On a clear day, you can see almost 100 miles. We're about 1,100 feet above the canyon floor, which geologists call a bench. And these tall spires, they give the Needles District its name. And somewhere out there, another 1,000 feet below the bench, the Green and Colorado rivers combine. You can hike to the confluence from the Needles District. The Mesa District is on the other side of the Green River, to the right. That thin line, it's the 100-plus mile heavy-duty 4x4 only White Rim Trail. It's an old mining road used to search for uranium. It meanders over White Rim sandstone, and those daring enough to complete the trail do so in 2 days. 4 if they're on a bicycle. 270 or so million years ago, that bench was a sand dune area, near the sea when the supercontinent Pangaea was forming. And at the time, this whole area was very close to the equator. Yes, the Earth's tectonic plates are always moving and rising and falling. It took another 50 million years or so for enough material to flow down ancient rivers, whose headwaters were in the ancestral Rocky Mountains, to create the Wingate sandstone that we're standing on. Today, the bench down there is about 5,000 feet above sea level, and I'm standing 1,000 feet above that. Everything that was in between eroded away as the Colorado Plateau began to rise, allowing the rivers to carve all of this. Mother Nature, pretty powerful. If you're looking to get some exercise, head down the Grand Viewpoint Trail. It's an out-and-back 2-mile round trip that's pretty flat after these steps. The canyon views are mostly unobstructed the whole way. Though everything is so far away, the view doesn't really change much. It's pretty popular, at least with those who aren't afraid to get close to the cliff edge. It's time to head back, and this time we're going to stop at a couple of the places we skipped on the way south. The first is very close to Grandview, but it looks west instead of south. It's called the Orange Cliffs Overlook. The view isn't bad from the side of the road, where an info sign reminds us that this is a wilderness area, and that we are the visitors, with an obligation to take nothing but memories and leave nothing but footprints. And not to step on the cryptobiotic soil. So I stick to the well-worn path. These are the Orange Cliffs. And yes, they're a bit orange, but no more so than the other cliffs. But you may remember that I said we're looking west. And at sunset, they're really orange. It's the best time to be here. Our next stop is called Buck Canyon Overlook, which faces east. It's another short walk to the rim. And you got to remember to obey these signs. Dogs are not allowed on the trail because they tend to hurt the landscape and frighten the little critters that are trying to eke out a living. This info sign tells us about the cattle grazing in the late 1800s and the uranium mining roads built in the 1950s. But it's time, tectonics, rivers, and the rare rainfall that created these magnificent landscapes. If you're a subscriber to my channel, you may have heard this before. Video just can't capture the majesty of a place like this. You really have to be here in person to experience it yourself. Our next stop is 6 miles down the road. It's another pullout. This one is for Candlestick Tower. There's no real trail to the rim here. Just step lightly. It's pretty obvious where the candlestick is. Is that Butte? Or is that a spire? And the rest of the view is of another nice canyon. But if you're suffering from canyon overload, and some of you will, there are other things to check out as well, like the ancient juniper trees. They've adapted well to the harsh environment, and they grow in very interesting ways, especially the bark. At this point, even I might be suffering from canyon overload, so I don't stay long. I continue north to the fork in the road, and this time we're going to take it to the left, to one of the best views in the park, the Green River Overlook. This is a busy area, and again, it's just a short walk to the rim. Like the Grand View, we're looking south again. And here the river is pretty easy to see. That's the Green River, another 1,000 feet below the White Rim. This is one of those places where it's really handy just to kind of sit, well, stare. You'll never run out of things to see. And the view stretches again about 100 miles. From here we're looking at the Maze District and some of the Needles. But take some time to just look at all of the detail. And when you do look at that landscape, you can see how harsh it is and how difficult it would be to explore. And that's why it was one of the last places in the United States to be explored and mapped. In 1869, John Wesley Powell and his team were as tough as the landscape. They went through here, on the river, and through the Grand Canyon, all the way to the Mexican border. And they did it in wooden boats. Today, there's plenty of outfitters in town who will take you down in a rubber raft. You can even go through the Class 5 rapids at the confluence, through Cataract Canyon. This is something I haven't done yet, but if any of you vendors are out there and want to give me a free ride, please leave a comment, because I'd like to do it. There's only 2 more stops on the island in the sky, and this one is one of my favorites. It's the Holman Springs Overlook. It only takes a couple of minutes to walk down the gently sloping trail. and it's rarely crowded. There's more vegetation here, and it's pretty interesting too. You can't really see the canyon until you get, well, right on top of it. There are several places where you have to hike up a little bit, and there's a very nice reveal of the canyon below. And it's a much narrower, smaller scale canyon than some of the others, which somehow makes it even prettier. There are many nice canyon overlooks in the island in the sky. And this one, because it only has a little parking area on the side of the road, is frequently missed, and that's a mistake. This is one of the more photogenic ones in the park, especially when the sun goes down. We only got a couple of more miles to complete all 34 miles of road in the island in the sky. We've seen many deep and faraway canyons, but the last stop is a little different. We have to hike about a mile and climb a bit to see the mysterious Upheaval Dome. If you've been paying attention, you know that uplift has played a big role in shaping this park. A 1-mile round-trip hike takes you to the rim of what looks to be a crater. It has a view of the Upheaval Dome, which is a geologic anomaly. In the rest of the park, there is geologic order. Younger rocks are on top of older rocks. There is little folding of the rock layers, which means that the area has been pretty stable for millions of years. The Upheaval Dome is quite different. It's about 3 miles across, and the rocks in the center are a place of dramatic disorder. In the center, the rocks are all tilted in weird ways, and they shouldn't be. And what's weirder is they came from thousands of feet below. And even the experts can't agree on how they got up here. Some say that since the dome looks like an impact crater from a meteorite, well, that's what they think it is. Others say that it was formed by one of the area's many salt domes. Below the park, there's up to 4,000 feet of salt, which were remnants of several old seaways. So far, nobody really knows who's right. In 2008, they found stretched out quartz crystals, which occur in impact zones. So right now, that's the leading theory, but who knows, there might be additional evidence in the future that points us in another direction. We've now seen all 34 miles of paved road in the island in the sky. You can do everything we've seen so far in 5 or 6 hours, depending on how long you stay at each location. If you don't have that much time, at least walk up to Mesa Arch and drive out to Grandview and then down to the Green River Overlook, and stop at least a couple of the west side pullouts. When it's time to head back to town, if you have an SUV, preferably with all-wheel drive, or better yet, a rental, take the fun way back via the Shafer Trail. It'll take over 2 hours to get all the way back to Moab, but it's through some of the most scenic landscape you'll ever see. In places, it's a little tricky, but if this guy can make it up the road on a bicycle, you certainly can make it down. And that's what we're about to do. To get there, take Highway 313 towards the Canyonland entrance. The trailhead is a couple of miles before the Island in the Sky Visitor Center. When the pavement ends, the road is still flat, as if to give you more time to get used to driving on the loose, sandy surface. Then there's an impressive overlook just before the trail cuts into the cliff face. We recorded nearly the entire 1.5-hour drive, and in order to show you as much of it as possible, I've sped up most of the driving footage. I did the trail a few years ago, and this time I didn't stop as often. I know it can look scary, but the road is surprisingly wide. It's even safe to pass. The first time I remember being, well, not really scared. Let's call it intimidated. The drop-off off the driver's window is about 1,100 feet, and it's very steep. But this time, before starting out, I did what is recommended. I checked on the trail's condition with the ranger at the visitor center. I learned that because the trail is so popular, the top portion is graded more often than it was in the past. The ranger actually said that the steep switchback section was the easiest part of the trip. I also grabbed a map. The dirt trail is 17 miles long. About halfway through, it changes names to the Potash Road. At the river, the trail joins the paved Highway 279 for several miles back to Moab. I've always done the trail in May, and it's always been dry. But after a rain, the trail may not be passable. The Canyonlands website has a road conditions page. Go to it before you head out. It has handy info, especially if you're new to this sort of thing. Scroll down to the Islands in the Sky section to check to see if there's any info on the Shafer Trail. As I write this, the Potash Road section is in rough shape, meaning that a passenger car might not be able to make it, making it even more important that you talk to a ranger before you head down. He may recommend that once you drive down, you just turn around and drive back up. But every time I've done it, it's been fine. The trail starts at about 5,900 feet. I've done the trail 3 times, twice in a 2-wheel drive truck-based SUV, and once in a Subaru Forester. And every time I've done it, the road was fine. But late in the season, or after a rain, the road might be too rough for an SUV that was designed to do nothing more than go back and forth to a kale shop. From the trailhead at 5,920 feet above sea level, we'll drop about 1,900 feet before getting back to Moab. The trail drops gradually. Most of the ride is uneventful. You can hardly tell that you're descending until you get to a switchback. By the way, if you don't want to put wear and tear on your own vehicle, you can rent a 4x4 Jeep in Moab. This was originally a cattle trail. Local ranchers called the Shafer brothers built it about 100 years ago to get their cattle to market. It was expanded greatly in the 1940s when it was used by uranium prospectors. That's also when many of the roads on the canyon floor were cut. Many of these still scar the landscape. By the 50s, the Shafer Trail was nearly forgotten. Like the rest of the area, it became a part of the national park in 1964. The trail became popular only recently. In 1980, only 57,000 people visited all of Canyonlands. Today, nearly 1 million come every year. Though the view is amazing, the drive is remarkably normal. There's never an uh-oh moment, or even a slight slip of the wheels. After about 10 minutes, the initial ascent is about over. It was almost too quick, though I never got over 15 miles an hour. Here's what I said about it at the time.
Wow, that was it. That was pretty easy. We dropped 1,100 to 1,200 feet in about 15 minutes at the most, it looks like. Didn't get a chance to look at the view. Basically, I'm looking at the road about 15 to 20 feet in front of me. It's pretty darn interesting, let me tell you. Thoroughly enjoying it.
Mountain bikers from around the world come to Moab, and some even try to pedal up this road. As a cyclist myself, I ask if the rider needs food or water. It's over 90 degrees, and sometimes they just might need it. There are several connecting trails in the canyon. The longest is the White Rim Road. It's over 100 miles long, winding its way across the caprock, often just a few feet from the canyons that are cut by the Colorado and Green Rivers, which are hundreds of feet below. The White Rim Road can be seen from many of Canyonland's viewpoints. Here it is from the Green River Overlook. There are few signs on the trail, but they do helpfully exist at this T intersection. The road ahead is the White Rim. I asked the ranger if the White Rim would be suitable for a vehicle like mine. She said it would probably be okay up until Muscle Man Arch, wherever that is. Well, I decided to go exploring. Oddly, the White Rim rises slightly. This took a toll on a couple of cyclists. These were a part of a tour group with a support vehicle. Because I hadn't studied this part of the map, I was expecting the trail to be near the rim. It wasn't, and it became sandier. This is not a place to get stuck. The trail info sheet states that it's best to take enough food and water for a day or two in case you break down and have to be rescued. It also claims that towing charges could easily reach $1,000. At a wide spot in the road, next to the cyclist support vehicle, I decided to head back. I learned later that Muscle Man Arch was a further 40 minutes down the road. A mile or so later, I rejoined the Shafer Trail. A wooden sign claims that it's 32 miles to Moab via the Potash Road. I've traveled about 8 miles so far, so the trail map, well, it's a bit misleading. A few hundred yards later, it starts to get rough. The path narrows and gets very rough as you descend into Shafer Canyon. It's here that you realize why you need a high clearance vehicle. Going slow and dodging the largest of the sharp rocks is critical. It becomes evident that the ranger was right. The top section is the easy part. Then there's a fairly flat clearing with nice views. This is a great spot to take your time, or even stop to enjoy the scenery. It gets rough again as you cross a wash. During a rain, this part can be treacherous, or even impassable. The drive up is also a challenge. These motorcyclists asked me about the part I just drove down, and they shared what was next for me. The trail is now on a broad shelf above the Colorado River. The cliffs rise 1,200 to 1,500 feet, and the view is amazing. It took 45 minutes to get here, including the White Rim excursion. From Dead Horse Point, high above, you can see this part of the road. This is the only overlook on the river, so it's worth spending some time exploring it and taking it all in. When Buzz Aldrin stepped on the moon, he described what he saw as magnificent desolation. I can think of no better way to describe this spot. It makes the rough ride well worth the effort. In the other direction, in the layers, you see millions of years of geology and Earth history. A little farther down the road, a faded spur trail heads to the right and provides another view of the river. Unfortunately, I didn't know this until I saw the spur trail from Dead Horse Point State Park the next day. Now that you know it's here, you should take it. From Dead Horse Point, you can see the next few miles of the road and a few more spur trails. By this time, the trail has changed names. It's now called the Potash Road and a portion of the White Rim Road. The road meanders for several miles. By the way, we're no longer in Canyonlands National Park. In fact, we haven't been since just before the river Overlook. On some maps, the road even has a number. It's called County Road 142. When the landscape opens up, again, you get that feeling of magnificent desolation. It's another good spot to stop and take a few pictures. As you go over a crest, there's a brief hint of blue on the horizon. They are potash evaporation pools from a mining operation. They provide a few of the non-tourism related jobs in Moab. They also provide nice contrast to the landscape. The road ends down at river level, so there are still several hundred feet to drop. And drop it does. It was too rough for the stabilization system, so sorry for the bumps. There are other trails down here, and there are no signs, so it's easy to get a bit lost, especially when heading in the other direction. Telephone poles are a sign that it's almost over. There are only a few miles of dirt road left. There's one more interesting photo op just before leaving the dirt. This balanced rock is about the size of a small bungalow. When you hit the pavement, you're on Highway 279. It starts just after the boat dock on the Colorado River. Suddenly, there's more greenery along the road. The Colorado is just to the right. Then there are great sandstone cliffs. This area is called Wall Street. Look for a sign pointing to Indian writing. Several feet above the road, in the dark desert varnish, the ancients left their mark. Most depict animals and those who hunted them. You may be wondering why they're so high off the ground. Well, the natural level of the dirt was below the area of the desert varnish. The dirt was removed when they built Highway 279. A little further down the road is the rock climbing area. This is the easy section, where local outfitters train first-timers to climb these nearly vertical walls. It seems fitting to end a journey that began by descending a cliff by watching someone climb one. There are just a few more miles back to Moab, and this will give you plenty of time to reflect. In just a couple of hours, you've descended over 1,900 feet on a road that was carved into a cliff. You've spent time in a harsh, pristine, former ranch with 1,200-foot tall stone walls that were once used as a natural corral. You've seen how resources are mined. You've seen ancient writing. And you've seen how some cheat gravity. All in all, not a bad way to spend an hour and a half to 3 hours. I've been to Canyonlands Island in the Sky many times, but there's much more to this huge national park. In October, I decided it was time to make my first real trip to Canyonland's Needles District. It's known for its rugged terrain and these towering slivers of sandstone that they call needles. We saw them when looking down from the Grand View. And of course, these needles give the area its name. It only has about 10 miles of paved road, but there are many more 4x4 trails. And there's also quite a few hiking trails here. And the weather in the fall is very good for hiking. The Needles District is about an hour and a half south of Moab. The last 34 miles are on the surprisingly scenic Highway 211, where a sign reminds us that the Needles are pretty much surrounded by Bears Ears National Monument, which here is pretty flat. But a few miles later, it's much more interesting. And the fall color is a nice complement to the sandstone canyons. Before we even get to the Needles, there's a sign for newspaper rock petroglyphs, so I just had to pull over. Newspaper rock is a popular name for sites like this. There's another one in Petrified Forest National Park. But here, the glyphs are a lot closer. The sign tells us that the area was populated for thousands of years, until about the 1300s. And during all of that time, the ancestral Pueblo used rocks to chip away at the dark desert varnish on the rock face. And through the ages, every culture that came through here left their mark. Some were clearly hunters of deer and bighorn. And there's also proof that the area wasn't totally abandoned after 1300, because some of the figures are on horses, which didn't get here until the Spanish came in the 1500s. There are also lots of footprints. They think at least some of these have been made more recently by the Navajo, because several of the feet have 6 toes. Tradition holds that this was a status symbol. And archaeologists, and well, there's no real easy way to say this, but they've dug up thousands of grave sites in the Four Corners, and they found that over 3% of the bodies they dug up had 6 toes. And the local traditions say that a person with 6 toes had some sort of an elite status. If you know more, please leave a comment. When the Europeans came through, they left their mark too. Of course, today, that is very illegal. So look, but don't touch. There's still about 12 miles of scenic road to the park gate. And even on an overcast day, the drive alone is worth the trip. If you want to get away from the crowds in Moab, this is a great place to do it, especially if you want to do a little rock climbing. The main gate to the park wasn't even manned. The visitor center is just a further mile up the road. It's typical for an off-grid site. Water is available, but there is no food, lodging, or gas. Of course, there's things to buy, including refrigerator magnets. There's a giant 3D map of the whole area, which is really quite interesting, and a little museum/education area. It has displays of the area's vegetation, the Native Americans who lived here, as well as the pioneering cowboys. Though I'm more interested in the area's early history and how people survived in this harsh climate for thousands of years. This area is rich in Native American artifacts and dwelling sites. And if you're in the backcountry and you happen to find one, they want you to turn off your GPS location system before you take a picture of them with your phone, because they want to protect the sites, but also because they want to give as many people as possible the joy of discovery And I gotta say, there's something I really like about that. There's also a nice shot of the confluence of the Green and Colorado rivers. I was hoping to see it in person, but I would soon learn that it was not to be on this trip. I also found this pothole display intriguing, and I was about to learn much more about them. With my appetite whetted, it was time to ask the ranger to help me plan my day. I first asked how I could see the confluence. He said I could drive there, but only if I had a 4x4 with a low-range gear. And I don't. But I knew there were lots of trails here, and it turns out there is one to the confluence. But it's 11 miles long. I didn't have the time for that. So he pulled out a park paper and highlighted a few shorter trails on its map. One was very close to the visitor center. The map calls it Stone Storehouse, but the trailhead sign calls it Roadside Ruin, and I wasn't really sure if I was in the right place until I grabbed one of the pamphlets from this box. It's just a half-mile round trip. Isn't really long enough to call it a hike, but it's not paved, so it does feel a bit like one. So I was in the right spot, and yes, I did put $1 in the slot to pay for the pamphlet. It says around 950 AD. People started migrating here from the Mesa Verde area. And yes, I've been there. It also says that another people from the Fremont area came here at about the same time. And please leave a comment if you know where that is. And remember that this was before the Spanish reintroduced horses to the area, so they had to walk the whole way on this very harsh and rocky and cactus-filled ground. Both groups were farmers, and they found enough edible plants, water, and arable land near what we now call the Salt Creek to sustain themselves. According to the pamphlet, this is Indian rice grass. Its seeds have a lot of nutrition, and apparently they were ground into a flour-like paste before they were consumed. And this green stuff on the left, it's called pepper grass. As you might expect, its seeds have a peppery taste, and apparently the Navajo used it for medicinal purposes. Several types of sagebrush are found in the area. This one was used to make a yellow dye, and its bark can be twisted into a weak twine. This is Fremont barberry. Its roots make a bright yellow dye, and it produces edible berries. Somehow I missed marker 5, but it's for saltbrush. They ate its seeds and apparently used the ashes to make baking powder, though it doesn't describe how they did that. As the vegetation gets bigger, the trail is getting windier. And that handrail, it's a hint that we're close to our destination.
That's it?
It's right there. It's right up there. It's interesting.
Wow.
Soon we're at the cross-bedded sandstone rock face. And when we follow it to the left, we see a small stone storage structure that's protected by a natural alcove. Back in the day, these little granaries were used to store seeds, corn, and other food stuff. But some of them instead were used to store intricate ceremonial items that only the elites were allowed to have. They like to build these structures under natural alcoves to protect them from the elements. And some were built in hidden places that are difficult to reach, because some folks like to take things that don't belong to them. To get into this one, the roof has small rectangular doors that they covered with a heavy slab of rock to help keep others out. And no, you can't climb on them. They don't want you to even touch them. Before we head back, I want to take one more look at this rock. If you look close, you can see that it's cross-bedded. This indicates that the area was once covered by giant wind-blown sand dunes. You can even tell what direction the wind was blowing. That can tell us something about seasonal climate changes a long, long time ago. The pamphlet has a few more tidbits to pass along as we head back. This is marker number 7. It's a narrow-leaf yucca. In Big Bend National Park, I saw a demo of how its sharp spines were used as sewing needles, and how its leaf fibers can be woven into cloth or a strong rope. This is prickly pear cactus. It doesn't exactly look like a food source, but believe it or not, it produces a edible, juicy fruit at certain times of year. And the pads can be eaten once you burn off all the tines. And once you scrape off the skin, the little juices inside can actually be used to soothe wounds. You gotta wonder who the first person was who thought of that one. So as we walk back, you may be wondering why the ancestral Pueblo left this area. They were here for 250 years. There was a good life here. By the early 1200s, the local climate in this area was quite a bit different than it was in the 950s. Nature somehow created droughts and temperature changes that made farming and plant growth less productive. People had to adapt. Some moved south to what is now New Mexico and Arizona. They joined local groups and others fleeing other areas with similar problems. These people would eventually become the Hopi and Zuni tribes. Others stayed and adapted to the colder climate by relying on wild plant gathering and hunting. Those groups would become the Ute and Paiute tribes. And I hope I'm pronouncing all of these things correctly. But other tribes people say that their people never left. They say that the spirits of their ancestors are still here. With only 10 miles of paved road, it's hard to get lost in the needles, and the map they give you is a nice little guide to all the pullouts along the way. It would have been nice if it was sunny, but even on this cloudy, dreary day, the drive is pretty nice. When I saw this little sign for Wooden Shoe Arch, well, I had to pull over and see what this was about. And it certainly wasn't crowded. I had to look for the arch. It's rather far away. It's a small one, but that does look like a big wooden shoe. As far as I could tell, there was no trail up to it. Apparently this is as close as you should get. I was a little disappointed that it was cloudy and rainy, and the park can't really look its best in weather conditions like this. But the views were still nice from the road, and it was a pleasant drive. And the drive to the end of the road is pretty nice. There's something interesting to see in every direction. The next place the ranger told me about was called the Pothole Trail. It's another short one. I recorded the whole out and back trip in 17 minutes with my Instagram VR camera. But don't worry, I'm not going to show you that whole thing. But I will try to explain what a pothole is and why they're so special. It turns out all these little depressions in the sandstone, well, they're little ecosystems that lay dormant in these small little sandstone depressions, at least when they're dry. But when the rains come and fill the potholes, they teem with life. With the skies threatening, I was hoping to witness that transformation. I suppose I could try to explain how this happens, but the Park Service made a video that explains it all. And since it's in the public domain, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel.
I'm talking about these desert potholes that some people call ephemeral pools. They can be found all over the park, wherever the rock surface is more or less level. And when they're dry, they're pretty unremarkable. You might see some dirt, a few seedlings, not much else. But when a good rain comes to fill this up with water, you'll find a tiny ecosystem filled with a surprising collection of animals. Let's take a look. Most people don't think of seafood when they visit Canyonlands, but potholes can actually contain several types of shrimp, including clam, fairy, and tadpole shrimp. Tadpole shrimp look like miniature horseshoe crabs and are actually living fossils. Some species of tadpole shrimp haven't changed in appearance for over 200 million years, making them the oldest living animal we know about. Other pothole dwellers include snails, mites, rotifers, worms, and tardigrades. Tardigrades, also called water bears or moss piglets, are cute, feisty little creatures. They're about 0.5 millimeter long, so you really need a microscope to see them. The tardigrades live all over the world, any place there's water, on moss, in lakes or ponds, and in desert potholes. Now, when the pothole's nice and full, tardigrades swim around happy as can be. When the sun comes out and the water starts to evaporate, tardigrades get ready for an amazing change. They secrete wax out of the armored plating across their backs and start to lose moisture. They can actually lose 99% of their body's moisture and slow their metabolism down to 0.1% of normal, entering an extreme hibernation-like state. When they're in this state, surrounded by a little waxy cyst called a ton, tardigrades can survive incredible climate change. Scientists have studied them in labs. They've heated them to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and frozen them to negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and nothing happens. I've heard they can even survive 1,000 times the radiation that would kill a human being, but nothing happens. They don't experience tissue damage when they're in that ton. All they're doing is waiting for the rain. It might take one storm or two or three to fill the pothole back up, but once it's full, the tardigrades respond pretty quickly. In about 4 hours, they're swimming around again, happy as can be. Not all pothole critters are as resilient. In fact, most survive just long enough to reproduce and lay their eggs before the pothole dries up. As you might imagine, long-term changes in temperature and precipitation can dramatically affect potholes. Scientists think they might give us clues about the biological impacts of climate change. So they've been monitoring them here at Canyonlands for some time now. Potholes are also very sensitive to human impacts. So when you visit the park, don't stick your finger in the wet pothole or your foot in the dry one. Just walk around them. And when you do, think a moment about the life that's waiting there at the bottom for the next big rain. I'm Karen Hanker. Thanks for joining me on Inside Canyonlands.
I gotta say, the videos made by Canyonlands are better than just about any other by the National Park Service. I stay on the path to avoid hurting the cryptobiotic soil before reaching the next sandstone area, where there's some interesting rocks, at least from a geologic point of view. The two different colors of sandstone tell us that something changed here a long time ago. If you're a geologist, please write a comment and let us know what you think that change was. There's more potholes to the right, but I stayed to the left to avoid them. On this trail there are hundreds of these little ecosystems. The trick is to avoid stepping in them. Many are filled with sand and don't look that impressive at all, and you can't imagine that there's a little world in there. One thing I can't help but notice is the almost complete lack of noise. There's little wind, and my footsteps and clogged sinuses are about the only sounds I can hear. I just might have to add this place to my list of places with the sound of silence. And that's a rare commodity if you live in a big city like I do. It looks like the trail goes up this way. It's much more of the same, but with a view that stretches to the horizon. I wander around a bit. Then I decide to climb this little rock pile to get a full 360-degree view. And interestingly, there's even tiny potholes up here. And I guess now I'm high enough to get into the wind. And sorry about the weird waves you see in the video. They're caused by a stitching error with my 360 VR camera, and I can't really do anything about it now. It's been a while since I've just gone exploring, and I gotta say, it's fun. You never know what you're going to find. And since those are some big rocks, I decided to head that way. Well, it looks like I'm not the only one who likes to do a little exploring. That was a fun little passage, with a great geologic story, I'm sure. I wish I knew more about the rocks. Is that a midden? It looks a little bit like an ancient midden, which is ancient animal waste. But it also looks like mud or other water-transported debris. But if that's true, how would it get here?
What are you doing?
I'm shooting some video with a 360.
She asked a good question. I'm not sure I knew the answer. That way looks sort of interesting, so I decided to go on over and see what was there. Took a bit of a scramble, but what I found was a hidden water-carved canyon. I guess we know now that that wasn't a midden, it was in fact waterborne debris. And the water must have been awfully high to deposit mud way up there. Places like this are nice little surprises. It makes the whole trip worthwhile. And I tried to get a little closer to the edge, but that ledge down there, it's lower and farther away than it looks. I decided it was time to head back. A few sprinkles were hitting the lens. But because there was no real trail, I just headed in what I thought was the correct direction. It looks remarkably different when you're going the other way, which is a good thing. But then I recognized the gap in the rocks, and I knew I was going the right way. For a short trail that mostly isn't a trail, it's a pretty interesting way to spend 20 minutes. The potholes, they're interesting. At least they are when you know what they are. And I wish it would have poured down rain so I could have seen the transformation of those tiny little life forms, because it was fun poking around the big rocks, and really fun exploring and finding that small hidden canyon. There aren't too many things that are bad about traveling in the fall, but one of them is that the days are shorter. It looks like this was going to be my last adventure in the Needles on this trip, and I really wish I had more time. The ranger highlighted another trail at the end of the road, the Slick Rock Trail. It's only 2.4 miles long, but I had a long drive ahead of me, and I didn't have a place to stay for the night, and the rooms in Moab were all booked. So I really needed to think about heading back. Moab's parks are its big draw, but if you can't get an Arches vehicle reservation, or if the line to the island in the sky is just too long, there's a place where you can go back in time 112 million years and walk where dinosaurs did. And then you can go back just 140 years ago and visit an old stagecoach rest area, and even search for and find dinosaur bones. This time machine is just 15 miles north of Moab, which gives you some time to imagine how different things were when dinosaurs were here. These sandstone cliffs, they weren't here. The landscape was flat. There were some dunes surrounding a wetland near a lake. And that sandy soil fed tall trees, ferns, and lots of other plants. The whole area was lush back then and provided plenty of food for lots of creatures. And we're going to a place that they knew well, a place where predators and prey literally cross paths. It's just one of the many dinosaur trackways north of Moab. They're all BLM sites, which means they're easily accessed and well documented. I'm heading to Mill Canyon, which is just a couple of miles down a gravel road off Highway 191. There's also a campground here, and a short, flat walk to the track site. The tracks are easier to see when the sun is low, so I got here just after sunrise. The tracks weren't discovered until 2009. Somehow they survived all that time, and even the days when there was a copper mill here, which is how this place got its name. There are over 200 tracks here, and what makes this place really special is the tracks were made by 10 different animal types, including meat and plant-eating dinosaurs, something that looked like this, and even small mammals. And we have to walk on the boardwalk to protect them. And unfortunately, some have already been damaged by selfish people trying to make molds of the prints. The BLM has a well-earned reputation for producing materials that help visitors understand their sites and their interpretations. It turns out when they were clearing this site, a pile of dino coprolite was found. That's fossilized dinosaur poop. In it, they found leaves and other plant material, which told them much about the area in which they grew. They also know that these tracks were left at different times over a period of many days or maybe even longer. Many of the tracks are very easy to see. Some are a little bit more difficult. Somewhere in there, there's a small gecko track that apparently was slipping in the mud. Today, lots of folks are worried about change. This is more proof that the world, and those who dominate it, is always changing. The successful adapt to the conditions. There's another sign of change that's much more recent, just a couple of 100 yards away. It's the ruins of an old stagecoach site. Road trips were a bit tougher in 1883, when this was built. This is the old halfway stage station. It was halfway between the nearest train station in Thompson Springs and Moab. It took a half a day to travel the 17 miles, a full day for the slower freight wagons, and their crews could spend the night. For the other travelers, this was a place to have lunch and to stretch their legs. It was used for about 10 years. Apparently they ate and drank canned goods and cooked in iron pots, at least until they broke. And it's really nice to see these relics are still here. Gives you a little idea of what life was like back then. There were also accommodations for horses, with a long water trough and a corral. Because of the area's topography, this area has been used by travelers for hundreds of years. Not far from here, the old Spanish Trail passes through. Before the Oregon Trail, it was a popular route to the West Coast. There are several old dirt tracks out here. One leads to the old copper mill that gave this area its name. And I wanted to explore one of them, but a local told me that it might be a bit too rough for my Hyundai. It's the one where dinosaur bones are sticking out of a rock face. I've never seen such a thing, and I was hoping to check it off my list. But, oh well. If you're lucky enough to make it up there, look for this sign put up by the BLM. It's right in front of two fossilized dinosaur leg bones that are still in the rock. Our next track site is just another couple of miles up the road on Highway 191, but on the other side. It's down another dirt road that's quite popular with jeepers and those looking for mountain biking trails. Once again, the BLM has provided some handy information. On this side, we learned that the tracks we're about to see were made 150 million years ago. That's 38 million years older than the ones we saw on the other side of the road. On the other side of the board, we learned that the tracks we're about to walk in were the first sauropod tracks found in Utah. And sauropods, they're the large plant eaters. And I find this line particularly interesting. The BLM encourages social media posts. This is in stark contrast to the National Park Service, which requires a filming permit to shoot video, and in most cases stills, in every national park and national monument. Here's the Park Service webpage as proof. It specifically mentions YouTube and TikTok, or any commercial social media site like Facebook or Instagram or any of the others, because they're commercial enterprises. This incredibly unfair law went into effect on October 28, 2022, and it needs to be changed, and we all need to do our part to make that happen. Anyway, it's enough of that. Luckily, now we're in a social media-friendly BLM site. The trail to this track site isn't exactly flat, and I know that some of you will ask, so no, this one is not suitable for wheelchairs. It's only a couple 100 yards up the slope to the site, and it only takes a few minutes to climb its 80 feet, which is enough to provide a nice view. There's no boardwalk here, and the footprints are huge. These were left by that large plant eater, a sauropod. And yes, apparently we are allowed to step in them, which I got to say is kind of fun. I'm literally stepping where it did 150 million years ago. There's also some three-toed tracks. Had a bit of a limp. The track on one side isn't as deep as the other. It's like he was favoring it in some way. And you got to wonder what it got in a fight with to cause it to limp. Well, that was a busy morning. I went to all three places by 9:30 a.m. Moab's national parks are really special, but I hope my morning showed you that there are many nearby places that are also worth exploring. And sure, I traveled by car, but also by imagination. Though we walked in the same place, this was much different when those giants walked, and even different from those stagecoach days. Kinda makes you wonder what this place will look like 150 million years into the future, and what, if anything, will be left of us to be discovered. Will the thing that finds our traces make us look as lumbering, violent, and dangerous as those dinosaurs? Well, isn't that something to think about on the drive to our next location? By now we know that Moab is more than just national parks. There's lots of places to explore, whether you're under your own power or using other sources. You can climb to a better vantage point, or you can go to Dead Horse Point State Park, which is one of my favorite places. For photographers like me, there are few better places to put your tripod. To get to Dead Horse, take 191 north, then take a left on 313. It shares the road with Canyonlands. Take the first left and continue until the road ends. The park is at the end of a several-mile-long butte that hovers above a landscape shaped by time and the Colorado River. The park has campsites and a few yurts for glampers, if glampers don't mind a 200-foot walk to a bathroom or a water spigot. There's a visitor center with helpful rangers and a few snacks. It's a popular place, but I've never had a problem with parking, which is not the case in the national parks. At the end of the Mesa, there's a short paved walkway to one of my favorite viewpoints. I've been here many times, and it never ceases to amaze. The light changes throughout the day. This was shot in the afternoon. Even on a hazy day, the landscape is incredible. Looking east, there's a glimpse of the Potash Ponds. Beyond them, the afternoon sun lights the snow-capped La Salle Mountains, 27 miles away. The view south isn't bad either. Somewhere down there, and off in the distance, the Green River joins the Colorado. But the best view is to the southwest, towards Canyonlands. That's the Colorado River down there. It in size that horseshoe bend as the Colorado Plateau rose over millions of years. And that road? It's our old friend, the Shafer Trail. We're standing at almost 6,000 feet, about 2,000 feet above the river. But this viewpoint isn't my favorite place to put the tripod. Actually, there are several others, but they require a bit of a scramble. And if you try to do this, be sure to walk only on the rocks to avoid killing the cryptobiotic soil. The plants and creatures who live here have a hard enough time, so please don't make it harder for them. Also, don't walk in the potholes, and they're just about everywhere. Because even when they're dry, they are full of little creatures that only come to life when the rains come. And it's best not to bring your dog, but if you must, the same rules apply. Don't let them destroy the homes of these hardy creatures. I've only been here for one sunset, but they tell me it gets pretty crowded. And at night, this is a great place to watch the stars. My favorite time to be here is sunrise. I'm rarely alone, as other shutterbugs cling to the cliffs. Often it's one of my places with the sound of silence. It's very rare to find a place so quiet, with a view that goes out for 100 miles. One morning I heard an eagle flap its wings. It was 100 feet below me. This is a special place. Beyond the bend is Canyonlands and Mesa Arch. It was from here that I first saw the Shafer Trail, and I knew that I had to drive it. As you might suspect, a place as scenic as this has been discovered by Hollywood. Several movies were shot here. This is roughly where Thelma and Louise drove off that cliff. There are 8 miles of hiking trails in the park. But staring into this landscape is my favorite activity. We're about 40 minutes from Moab, so camping up here makes the sunrise shoots a little bit easier. The sites can be booked in advance, and as I write this in mid-June, there were several spaces available in mid-July, just a month out. All the bookings must be made online, and the process is pretty straightforward. The park's website is full of valuable information, and it has a nice video too, much of which was shot with a drone. As an FAA-certified drone pilot myself, I asked if that was legal. Well, it is, but only between November and February, and you have to buy a permit to do it. By the way, they tell me it's very crowded around Thanksgiving. In fact, the busy times for this park are really in the spring and the fall. The summers, well, they can be rather hot. Like Canyonlands, you don't need a reservation to go to Dead Horse Point. You can just drive up and pay the fee. The gate is manned, they'd, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. I hope you can see why Dead Horse Point is one of my favorite places to photograph. And when in Moab, it's something everyone must see. Our last Moab adventure is a 1 to 2 hour road trip that starts in a spectacular canyon. When it widens, we drive through the Castle Valley to the Fisher Towers, where several Hollywood movies were filmed. Our turnaround point is what's left of an historic suspension bridge across the Colorado. We're going to see all of this on Highway 128, which is just north of Moab. It heads west from 191, next to the electric vehicle charging station. It follows the Colorado River in a canyon so steep that my satellite radio stopped working. National Geographic called the road spectacular. It S's its way along the river for 26 miles. A connecting hiking bike trail flows between the road and the river for a few miles too. Many of you have probably never used a paper map before, or a road atlas. But from the TMI department, I'm a big fan of Rand McNally maps, especially on these western road trips, because you'd be surprised at how often there is no cell phone coverage. So map apps simply don't work. When I'm in a canyon like this, and sometimes even in wide open spaces that are very remote, you simply cannot rely on your car's navigation system or your phone to help you get where you want to go. So basic map reading skills come in very handy. The Rand McNally maps also let you know which roads are scenic. That's how I found this road and many of the others that I used on this road trip. And driving through these landscapes is one of the most memorable parts of this trip or any other road trip. From the map, you can also see that this is the shortest route from Moab to Grand Junction, Colorado, which has a much bigger airport than the one in Moab. I typically do this drive in the evening after visiting the parks. During the summer, when the sun is up late, it's a nice way to spend an hour or two after dinner. And since we're next to the river, I suppose I should mention river activities. This part of the river is pretty calm, and it's perfect for a float trip. As you can see, these folks are thoroughly enjoying their float trip. Or is that a swimming party? I've done some whitewater rafting, but I've never rafted down the Colorado. Maybe one of the town's outfitters will sponsor me. And by the way, if anyone out there knows how to get sponsors, please put it in a comment. That's something I really need to learn. If a lazy float trip isn't your thing, jet boats are also available. And it looks like they slow down and are courteous to the rafters. Near the big bend in the river is one of the area's bigger resorts. And the rooms at this place aren't exactly cheap. In October when I was here, they were about $1,000 a night, which is way too rich for me. But it does have a great location and a nice reputation. Many of the flat areas near the river are used for farming, with help of irrigation from the river. We're now in the Castle Valley, and Hollywood loves these roads. One of them leads to another called the Professor Valley, which was used in City Slickers 2, Austin Powers, and many other Hollywood movies. Near mile marker 21, there's a small sign pointing east to the Fisher Towers. They were named after an 1880s pioneer, but they have a much longer history. These are remnants of those same ancestral Rocky Mountains that I mentioned in the Gooseneck segment. To see them from this angle, and you really should, you can take a hike down this trail, and on a sunny day, it's well worth it. This is a BLM recreation area with a small campground and a pit toilet, but no water. There are a number of hiking trails, but since the 1960s, the main activity here is rock climbing. There are small spires to learn on, and there are much bigger ones for the highly skilled. A further 11 miles up Highway 128. There's another old landmark. Pull over just before crossing the bridge. Believe it or not, this relic was once the longest suspension bridge in Utah, and it held that title until April of 2008, when it was destroyed by a grass fire, started by a small boy who was playing with matches. It was called the Dooley Bridge when it was built in 1916. It had a 500-foot-long wooden driving surface that was only 8 feet wide. More recently, it was used as a bike trail. This scenic highway continues for another 20 miles. It's a great way to spend an evening. Well, it's about time to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching the whole thing. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have the means and are so inclined, try to find the well-hidden contribution button. This video took hundreds of hours to put together, and you have no idea how appreciated just a $2 donation is. The secret word for those of you who made it to the end is Copperlight. Put it in the comments to let me know you've seen it all. As you've seen, there's lots to do and explore in Moab, but it's pretty expensive from May through October. But it's much more affordable November through March. In October, this room cost me $190, and other options were nearly twice as much. In the colder months, there's plenty of rooms that are half of that. There are other advantages as well. There are fewer crowds, and you don't need a reservation to drive into Arches. And the hikes seem a lot shorter when the temperature isn't near 100. The shorter days at that time of year aren't great for outdoor activities, but in this small town, there's lots to do and a lot to eat after the sun goes down. Few places, regardless of their size, have as much to offer. Over the last 20 years, I've spent many weeks over several trips here, and there's still lots of stuff I haven't done yet. And by the way, if you have any ideas on things that I should include in the next version of this video, please leave them in the comments. Not only for my benefit, but also for the community that helps support this channel. If you've never been to Moab, I hope this video has encouraged you to plan a trip. And if you have been here before, hopefully you'll plan your next one. There really are some nice advantages to the off-season. For some reason, I believe in providing as much information as possible in these videos, so I've tacked on 3 that were produced by the National Park Service. The first covers hiking and backpacking in Canyonlands. The next will prepare you for the 100-mile White Rim Road, and the last covers whitewater rafting through Cataract Canyon.
Few places can make a person feel as small as the massive landscapes of the Canyonlands backcountry. Exploring on foot is an intimate experience in rugged terrain that can challenge even the most skilled backpacker. As you research and plan for your backcountry trip, here are a few tips we hope will reward your effort with an unforgettable wilderness experience. Weather conditions in the backcountry vary wildly, from oppressive heat to cold and snow, and sudden flash floods that can throw a wrench in even the best laid plans. Come to the park with a solid itinerary, but understand there may be closures, and park rangers can help answer questions and map out your options. Water is sacred in the desert, with sources few and far between. This presents the single biggest challenge for overnight backpacking itineraries. The best solution is to carry enough water for your entire trip from the trailhead. When in doubt, always carry more water. Carry an appropriate map and compass, and know how to use them. While GPS can be handy for route finding, electronics can fail, and there is often no cellular communication possible within the park. Satellite communicators can be used for backcountry emergencies. Know how and when to use them responsibly. The park backcountry is managed with both designated campsites and separate at-large camping zones to help facilitate a spectrum of wilderness experiences. In designated zones, camping is limited to the sites reserved in advance on your permit. This helps simplify the planning process and guarantees your specific itinerary. These defined sites are ideal for shade and shelter and clearly marked with boundary posts. By limiting your camp activities to the designated space, you will maximize your privacy and feeling of solitude and keep these iconic locations in pristine condition. Campfires and hammocks are not allowed. There is simply not enough wood, and trees can be easily damaged. At-large zones are not an alternative to designated sites, but rather an opportunity to explore the most remote and wild areas of the park. Here, there are no maintained trails, only primitive routes that can be tedious, challenging, and sometimes scary. This complex terrain is a canvas to design trips that will not only challenge your backcountry skill, but reward the effort with an unparalleled wilderness experience. Where trails don't exist, the key is to leave as few footprints as possible, focusing on slick rock and wash bottoms. If your route forces you onto biological soil crusts, back up, slow down, and find durable surfaces to connect your route. These soil crusts are complex living organisms and the foundation of the desert ecosystem. One careless step not only destroys these fragile organisms, but increases erosion and leads to unnecessary unofficial trails. In some areas, off-trail navigation is complex and challenging, and park rangers have strategically placed cairns to link up durable surfaces to make navigation easier. You might be tempted to kick over cairns or even build new ones. Don't do it. That's a job exclusively for the rangers. Finding a hard-earned campsite at the end of a long day is the ultimate backcountry reward, and the best sites are found, not made. Look for broad slick rock benches above the canyon floor, where you can find large, flat sites with massive views. These camps must be 1 mile from any road, not in alcoves or on biological soils, and 300 feet from archaeological sites and water sources. The dry soils of the desert do not decompose waste like forest or mountain soils. All garbage, both organic and inorganic, needs to be carried out. In designated sites, all human waste must be carried out of the backcountry using a disposable human waste bag. In at-large zones, we also recommend human waste bags, or dig an appropriate cat hole at least 300 feet away from water sources. Never burn or leave toilet paper in the backcountry. Use a small bag for your paper, and take it with you. Water in the desert is incredibly rare. These life-giving sources are critical for wildlife. Swimming, bathing, or using soaps to wash dishes will contaminate the source. Non-native invasive species are easily transported on boots, clothing, vehicles, and other gear. Clean your gear before entering and leaving the backcountry. Canyonlands is known for its remoteness and quiet solitude. Excessive noise diminishes that experience for everyone. Don't play music or yell echoes across the canyon, even if you think you are alone. Let the sounds of nature prevail. Canyonlands is a living cultural landscape with an archaeological record that spans thousands of years. Viewing these sites in person is a powerful and educational experience we are collectively responsible for protecting. Leave artifacts where you find them. Observe archaeological sites from a distance and do not enter the surrounding areas or structures. Many of these sites are of sacred importance to people living today. So please, visit with respect. Carefully consider what photographs you share on social media, and remember your digital footprint will remain long after you've left the park. Avoid posting tags with GPS coordinates and exact routes, and allow future visitors the joy of discovery. We hope these tips will help you have an unforgettable experience that builds a deep connection with Canyonlands. Immerse yourself in the wilderness, enjoy it with humility and respect, and preserve this experience for future generations. Traversing 1,000 feet below the island in the sky, the 100-mile White Rim Road is famous for some of the most rugged and expansive views anywhere on the Colorado Plateau. This is an adventure defined by solitude, wildness, and self-reliance. As you research and plan for the White Rim, here are a few tips that will help protect these unique qualities and reward your effort with an unforgettable backcountry experience. Under favorable weather conditions, the White Rim Road is moderately difficult for low-range four-wheel drive vehicles with high clearance. The steep and exposed climbs, deep sand, and technical rocks make the White Rim Loop a popular and challenging mountain bike ride as well. Most vehicles can make the loop in 2 to 3 days, and up to 4 on a bicycle. When developing your itinerary, know your skill and fitness level, as well as the mechanical condition and capabilities of your vehicle or bike. Make a realistic plan and stick to it. Check the weather and get road condition updates before heading out. Seasonal flooding and mud can make the route impassable. If the forecast looks spotty, consider turning around. Spring and fall are the most popular seasons to travel the White Rim, and temperatures can still hit over 100 degrees. The route is almost always exposed, and shade is at a premium. In winter, snow and ice can be a challenge. Vehicles should carry tire chains and a shovel, and be prepared with all the necessary tools for trailside repairs. Carry extra food, water, and clothing. Watch your time, your fuel, and your energy. There is no water along the White Rim Road. When in doubt, always carry more water. For mountain bike trips, we highly recommend a four-wheel drive support vehicle to carry water and equipment. The White Rim Road is well-signed and easy to follow. Your vehicle should never have to leave the road. Drive directly over obstacles like rocks, sand, and mud. Straddle ruts and washouts, even if they are wider than your vehicle. When passing, use an existing turnout, dry wash bottom, or solid rock surface to pass other vehicles, motorcycles, and bikes. There are limited spots for passing. You might have to back up to an appropriate spot. Be patient, watch your speed, and be courteous to other drivers and cyclists. In places like Murphy Hogback and Hardscrabble Hill, the road is only wide enough for one vehicle, and passing can be dangerous and nearly impossible. Be aware of challenges, drive slowly, and stop frequently to scout ahead on foot before committing to these technical sections. Tall vehicles like sprinter vans and trucks with campers or rooftop tents may have trouble navigating the overhead ledges upstream of Labyrinth Camp. Photo opportunities abound from the road. There is never any reason to take vehicles or bikes off-road for photos. Even at iconic locations like Monument Basin, the best views are directly on the road. Other popular roadside attractions are accessible on foot only. At Musselman Arch, leave your bike at the pullout and preserve the opportunity to view the arch undisturbed by not hiking, scrambling, or climbing on the arch. When hiking, always walk on marked trails, solid rock, or in sandy washes. Biological soil crust and desert vegetation is very fragile. These soil crusts are complex living organisms and the foundation of the desert ecosystem. One careless step not only destroys these fragile organisms, but increases erosion and leads to unnecessary unofficial trails. Motorcycles are permitted along the White Rim. Group size is limited to minimize sound and wildlife disruptions and keep dust down as a courtesy to others. Camping is limited to the sites reserved in advance on your permit. This helps simplify the planning process and guarantees your specific itinerary. These sites are maintained by the park, clearly marked with boundary posts, and optimized for privacy, solitude, and expansive views. By limiting your camp activities to the designated space, you can help keep these iconic locations in pristine condition. Campfires and hammocks are not allowed. There is simply not enough wood, and trees can be easily damaged. Use park-provided toilets for solid human waste, or remove it in toilet systems. If you have to go during the day, plan on utilizing existing toilets. Don't throw trash in the pit toilets. All garbage, both organic and inorganic, needs to be carried out. Make sure all trash and food is secure. Ravens and other animals are attracted to food and trash and will spread it. Food tarps make it easy to clean up microtrash and food crumbs. Carry a trash bag in your vehicle and pick up litter, even if it's not yours. Make one last sweep of your camp and leave it better than you found it. Canyonlands is known for its remoteness and quiet solitude. Excessive noise diminishes that experience for everyone. Don't play music or yell echoes across the canyon, even if you think you are alone. Avoid revving your engine or driving a poorly tuned vehicle. Let the sounds of nature prevail. If you are patient and maybe a bit lucky, Canyonlands can offer amazing wildlife viewing opportunities. Bighorn sheep are particularly sensitive to loud vehicles and human presence. When observing wildlife, maintain your distance and remain quiet. Canyonlands is a living cultural landscape with an archaeological record that spans thousands of years. Viewing these sites in person is a powerful and educational experience we are collectively responsible for protecting. Leave artifacts where you find them. Observe archaeological sites from a distance and do not enter the surrounding areas or structures. Many of these sites are of sacred importance to people living today. So please, visit with respect. Carefully consider what photographs you share on social media, and remember your digital footprint will remain long after you've left the park. Avoid posting tags with GPS coordinates and exact routes, and allow future visitors the joy of discovery. We hope these tips will help you have an unforgettable experience that builds a deep connection with Canyonlands. Immerse yourself in the wilderness, enjoy it with humility and respect, and preserve this experience for future generations. The backcountry roads of the Needles and the Maze lead to some of the most remote and beautiful corners of the Colorado Plateau. This is an adventure defined by solitude, wildness, and self-reliance. As you research and plan your trip, here are a few tips that will help protect these unique qualities and reward your effort with an unforgettable backcountry experience. Roads in the Needles will challenge drivers with steep grades, off-camber drops, and paint-scraping narrows. Elephant Hill has a turn so tight it can only be navigated in reverse. Roads in the Maze are equally challenging, but are even more remote. The stretch from Teapot Rock Campsite to the Land of Standing Rocks is notorious for damaging vehicles and stranding the unaware. All of the Needles and Maze roads require a high-clearance, low-range, four-wheel drive vehicle. If you end up stuck or broken down, towing fees will cost over $1,000. This is not a place for inexperienced drivers to test their skills. When developing your itinerary, make a realistic plan and stick to it. Check the weather and get road condition updates before heading out. Spring and fall are the most popular seasons for backcountry travel in the park, and temperatures can still hit over 100 degrees. Seasonal flooding and mud can make the roads impassable, especially on the Flint Trail, where the road traverses slopes of clay. In winter, snow and ice can be a challenge. Water sources are limited and not near any campsites in the Maze and Needles, so bring more than you need. In Salt Creek, Horse Canyon, and Lavender Canyon, know how to navigate quicksand and deep sand, and be ready to self-rescue if you get in trouble. Always travel in pairs, and have a strategy for self-rescue, and the skills to make basic repairs. Every vehicle should have at least one full-size spare, a shovel, high-lift jack, and chains for all 4 tires. All roads in Canyonlands are well signed and easy to follow. Your vehicle should never have to leave the road. Drive directly over obstacles like rocks, sand, and mud. Straddle ruts and washouts even if they are wider than your vehicle. There are limited spots for passing, but you should never drive over vegetation or off the road. Use an existing turnout, dry wash bottom, or solid rock surface to pass other vehicles. You might have to back up to an appropriate spot. Be courteous to other drivers and cyclists. Drive slowly and stop frequently to scout ahead on foot before committing to difficult sections. Motorcycles are permitted on backcountry roads. Group size is limited to minimize sound and wildlife disruptions, and keep dust down as a courtesy to others. Photo opportunities abound from the road. There is never any reason to take vehicles or bikes off-road for photos. Visit roadside attractions on foot only, and travel on durable surfaces. When hiking, always walk on marked trails, solid rock, or in sandy washes. Biological soil crust and desert vegetation is very fragile. These soil crusts are complex living organisms and the foundation of the desert ecosystem. One careless step not only destroys these fragile organisms, but increases erosion and leads to unnecessary unofficial trails. Camping is limited to the sites reserved in advance on your permit. This helps simplify the planning process and guarantees your specific itinerary. These sites are maintained by the park, clearly marked with boundary posts, and optimized for privacy, solitude, and expansive views. By limiting your camp activities to the designated space, you can help keep these iconic locations in pristine condition. Campfires and hammocks are not allowed. There is simply not enough wood, and trees can be easily damaged. In remote areas of the park, like the maze, all users are required to carry out their solid human waste. You can use commercially available human waste disposal bags or other toilet systems that securely contain human waste in a sealed container. In some Needles campsites, you may use park-provided toilets for solid human waste. Don't throw trash in the pit toilets. All garbage, both organic and inorganic, needs to be carried out. Make sure all trash and food is secure. Ravens and other animals are attracted to food and trash and will spread it. Food tarps make it easy to clean up microtrash and food crumbs. Carry a trash bag in your vehicle and pick up litter, even if it's not yours. Make one last sweep of your camp and leave it better than you found it. Canyonlands is known for its remoteness and quiet solitude. Excessive noise diminishes that experience for everyone. Don't play music or yell echoes across the canyon, even if you think you are alone. Avoid revving your engine or driving a poorly tuned vehicle. Let the sounds of nature prevail. If you are patient and maybe a bit lucky, Canyonlands can offer amazing wildlife viewing opportunities. Bighorn sheep are particularly sensitive to loud vehicles and human presence. When observing wildlife, maintain your distance and remain quiet. Canyonlands is a living cultural landscape with an archaeological record that spans thousands of years. Viewing these sites in person is a powerful and educational experience we are collectively responsible for protecting. Leave artifacts where you find them. Observe archaeological sites from a distance and do not enter the surrounding areas or structures. Many of these sites are of sacred importance to people living today. So please, visit with respect. Carefully consider what photographs you share on social media, and remember your digital footprint will remain long after you've left the park. Avoid posting tags with GPS coordinates and exact routes, and allow future visitors the joy of discovery. We hope these tips will help you have an unforgettable experience that builds a deep connection with Canyonlands. Immerse yourself in the wilderness, enjoy it with humility and respect, and preserve this experience for future generations. The Colorado and Green Rivers have played a significant role in shaping this landscape. Above their confluence in the heart of Canyonlands, the rivers flow for miles and miles of flat water, offering a unique perspective on the park from the bottom up. As you research and plan for your flatwater river trip, here are a few tips we hope will reward your effort with an unforgettable wilderness experience. On both the Colorado and Green Rivers, launch ramps are outside the park boundaries. While there is no formal check-in process with a park ranger, you should be prepared to present your permit and all the required equipment at some point on the trip. Keep the boat ramp clear by preparing all of your equipment away from the launch areas. During high water, groups can plan on covering about 15 to 20 miles per day. In low water, 10 to 15 miles is more likely, depending on how much hiking or paddling you'd like to do. Consider leaving early in the morning. Afternoon winds are common and can completely halt downriver progress. Remember to anchor boats and secure loose items like your PFD at all times. Be prepared for minor rapids. At lower flows, you may have to navigate short, rocky stretches. Motorboats are allowed on both rivers. Be considerate of others and minimize your wake. There are no designated campsites along the rivers in Canyonlands, and all sites are first come, first serve. If you have a small group, make sure to take a small camp. During late summer and fall, when the rivers are low, sandbars are plentiful and make ideal camps. During high water, camps can be difficult to find, especially for large groups. You may have to climb cut banks to the benches above the river for camping. If you find a good camp early, consider stopping. There are no guarantees of something better downstream. Below the confluence on River Left, there is a large sign warning about the rapids just a few miles downstream. Plan on stopping here and use the campsite registration box. This system is a courtesy to others and does not guarantee a site, but it does help other boaters plan their stops in advance. This applies to both canoeists as well as groups continuing down Cataract Canyon. Arriving at a pristine campsite at the end of a long day is the ultimate backcountry reward. When it feels like you are the first person to set foot on that beach, it is because groups before you worked hard to minimize their impact, and you can leave that same experience for the next visitor. We recommend using a kitchen mat to keep camps as clean as possible. Food scraps should never be discarded or buried, as they may attract wildlife like bears and skunks. Wastewater from cooking should be strained and then poured into the main river. Keep side streams free of soaps and oils. Food and trash should be secured at all times to prevent birds, ants, and mice from being attracted to popular camps. All river runners are required to carry out their solid human waste. Toilet systems must securely contain human waste in a sealed, watertight container. This is most easily accomplished by using a washable and reusable toilet system with RV dump fittings. Another option is to use commercially available human waste bags and then store them in a dry bag or tube and labeled human waste. Liquid waste goes directly into the river to keep beaches clean and odor-free. Only driftwood may be collected and burned for firewood. The fire must be fully contained at all times inside a rigid, durable metal fire pan. All fire debris and ash must be packed out, so keep fires small and avoid half-burned logs. Fire blankets are recommended to make for a fast and simple cleanup. As you rig, make one last sweep of your camp, disperse any unused firewood, and leave your camp better than you found it. When hiking, always walk on marked trails, solid rock, or in sandy washes. Biological soil crust and desert vegetation is very fragile. These soil crusts are complex living organisms and the foundation of the desert ecosystem. One careless step not only destroys these fragile organisms, but increases erosion and leads to unnecessary unofficial trails. Canyonlands is known for its remoteness and quiet solitude. Excessive noise diminishes that experience for everyone. Don't play music or yell echoes across the canyon, even if you think you are alone. Let the sounds of nature prevail. If you are patient and maybe a bit lucky, Canyonlands can offer great wildlife viewing opportunities. Harassing or approaching wild animals will often cause them to run, using up energy and possibly causing injury. Only view wildlife from a distance and remain quiet. Canyonlands is a living cultural landscape with an archaeological record that spans thousands of years. Viewing these sites in person is a powerful and educational experience we are collectively responsible for protecting. Leave artifacts where you find them. Observe archaeological sites from a distance and do not enter the surrounding areas or structures. Many of these sites are of sacred importance to people living today. So please, visit with respect. Carefully consider what photographs you share on social media, and remember your digital footprint will remain long after you've left the park. Avoid posting tags with GPS coordinates and exact routes, and allow future visitors the joy of discovery. We hope these tips will help you have an unforgettable experience that builds a deep connection with Canyonlands. Immerse yourself in the wilderness, enjoy it with humility and respect, and preserve this experience for future generations.